The biting wind, a relentless sculptor of the Patagonian coast, whipped across the vast, undulating expanse of the South Atlantic, carrying with it the briny scent of a truly wild ocean. It was a world forged in the crucible of elemental forces, where the land met the sea in a dramatic clash of craggy cliffs, pebbled shores, and turbulent, foam-crested waves. Here, life pulsed with an ancient, untamed rhythm, dictated by instinct and the inexorable cycles of nature. Circa 2010, and into the early months of 2011, this stark, breathtaking landscape was home to teeming colonies of Magellanic penguins. Thousands upon thousands of them, a living carpet of black and white, dotted the nesting grounds, their raucous calls a constant, vibrant symphony against the roar of the surf. They moved with an awkward, endearing waddle on land, their short legs propelling their torpedo-shaped bodies with an almost comical urgency. But the moment they plunged into the ocean, they transformed. Here, in their true element, they were creatures of unparalleled grace and speed, darting through the frigid currents with effortless power, their wings, once clumsy flippers, becoming powerful oars. Among these countless individuals, indistinguishable to the casual observer, was a male penguin, robust and driven, whose life was a perfect testament to this primal existence. He was a creature of pure instinct, his every action governed by the deep-seated programming of his species. He hunted with a lean efficiency, diving into the dark, cold waters to chase schools of silvery anchovies and krill, his body a finely tuned instrument of survival. His days were a relentless pursuit of sustenance, a constant vigilance against predators, and an unwavering commitment to the continuation of his kind. The salt on his beak, the chill of the deep, the warmth of the sun on his back after a successful hunt, these were the only truths he knew. His colony was a microcosm of raw life, a bustling metropolis of squawks, preening, mating rituals, and the tireless work of raising chicks. The air thrummed with the energy of thousands of beings, each playing their part in the grand, intricate design of nature. He knew the distinct calls of his mates, the scent of their nests, the subtle shifts in the ocean currents that guided their migratory paths. There was no room for introspection, no concept of a world beyond the immediate needs of survival and reproduction. He was a perfect cog in a perfectly balanced, wild machine, an embodiment of the untamed beauty and harsh realities of the Patagonian wilderness. The vastness of the ocean, stretching endlessly to the horizon, was his domain, his highway, his provider. He was Dindim, though he had no name then, just an instinctual drive, a living testament to wild independence. Then, a subtle shift. Not a sudden, cataclysmic event, but a creeping, insidious change in the very fabric of his world. It began with a faint, unfamiliar odor, a acrid tang that mingled with the clean, sharp scent of the sea. A sheen, like an iridescent bruise, started to appear on the surface of the water, a dark, viscous film that spread silently, menacingly, across the migratory routes. Early in 2011, the environmental crisis, a human-made disaster far from his conscious understanding, had begun its grim work. Dindim, driven by the same instinct that had always guided him, plunged into the waters that were now subtly, dangerously altered. The first touch was disorienting. The water felt heavier, thicker. As he surfaced, he instinctively preened, attempting to smooth his feathers, but instead of the usual clean glide, his beak met with a sticky, tar-like substance. Panic, a cold, primal dread, began to take hold. His feathers, once sleek and perfectly waterproof, became matted, clumping together, losing their insulating properties. The chill of the ocean, which he had always effortlessly defied, began to seep into his core. He struggled, he thrashed, he tried to swim away from the spreading darkness, but the oil clung to him relentlessly, a suffocating shroud. It burned his eyes, stung his nostrils, and when he tried to clean it off, he ingested the toxic bitterness, which sent a sickening wave through his small body. His movements became sluggish, his powerful flippers now heavy and ineffective. Disorientation set in, a profound confusion that robbed him of his innate sense of direction. He was separated from his colony, the familiar calls fading into the distant roar of a suddenly menacing sea. The once pristine ocean, his lifeblood, had turned into a suffocating trap. The days that followed blurred into an agonizing haze of desperate struggle. His body, weakened by illness and the relentless cold, fought against the viscous grip of the oil. Each breath was a painful effort, each dive an act of sheer will that ended in exhaustion. The boundless energy that had defined his existence was slowly, inexorably, draining away. He drifted, a tiny, helpless speck on the vast, indifferent ocean, carried by currents he no longer had the strength to fight. The sounds of the sea, once a soothing symphony, were muffled by the struggle, replaced by the frantic beating of his own heart, a drum of impending doom. He was alone, abandoned, experiencing a profound sense of helplessness as his world, and his life, slowly ebbed away. By March of 2011, the sun beat down on the small, unassuming village of Proveta, nestled on the verdant slopes of Ilha Grande, a jewel off the coast of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The air here was thick with the scent of salt, damp earth, and the sweet perfume of tropical flora, a stark contrast to the biting winds of Patagonia. Life in Proveta moved at a gentle, unhurried pace, dictated by the tides and the rhythm of the fishing boats that dotted the small harbor. João Pereira de Souza, a man whose 71 years had etched lines of weathered wisdom onto his face, was a familiar sight on the beach. A retired bricklayer, his hands, though gnarled, still possessed the strength and dexterity of a lifetime of manual labor. Now, he spent his days as a fisherman, his small boat a trusty companion against the endless blue. His eyes, the color of warm earth, held a quiet depth, a profound compassion that often went unnoticed by the bustling world. This particular morning, the usual tranquility of the beach was broken by an unusual sight. Washed up on the rocks, where the waves gently lapped at the shore, was a dark, inert form. João, on his customary walk, his gaze sweeping the horizon, noticed it immediately. His heart gave a jolt. It was a bird, but not one he recognized from these tropical waters. As he drew closer, the truth solidified, chilling him despite the warmth of the sun. It was a penguin, covered in a thick, black, viscous oil, barely moving, a ghost of a creature on the verge of death. The sight stirred something deep within João, a surge of empathy, a visceral understanding of suffering. He knelt beside the bird, his calloused fingers gently probing its matted feathers. The penguin was shockingly light, its body trembling faintly. Its eyes, dull and glazed, held a desperate, unseeing terror. Some local community members, passing by, offered quick glances, a few murmurs of pity, perhaps a suggestion to leave it to nature's course. But João, with a quiet determination that belied his age, dismissed their unspoken skepticism. He couldn't leave it, not like this. His home, a modest, humble dwelling perched overlooking the bay, became a makeshift sanctuary. It was a place of simple comforts, the walls adorned with faded photographs and fishing nets. The scent of dried fish and sea air usually permeated its small rooms, but now, a pungent, cloying odor of crude oil began to mix with it, clinging to the air like a shroud. João carefully carried the fragile bird inside, laying it gently on a spread-out cloth on the cool, tiled floor. The penguin lay utterly still, a testament to its profound exhaustion and pain. João moved with a quiet urgency, his mind already formulating a plan. He boiled water, found an old, soft cloth, and a bottle of mild dish soap, his movements deliberate, imbued with a purpose that transcended the simple act of cleaning. The harsh reality of the polluted beach had given way to the gritty compassion of a single man. In that small, unassuming home, a silent battle for life had just begun. Dindim, still only a name João would later bestow, was terrified, his body racked with immense pain, his mind a whirlwind of fear and distrust. But even in his near-death state, he would slowly, almost imperceptibly, begin to register the presence of a gentle, persistent care, a warmth in the human touch that was so different from the cold indifference of the polluted sea. The weeks stretched into months, a slow, painstaking ballet of tender nurturing. From March to June of 2011, João dedicated himself utterly to the small, ailing creature. His days took on a new rhythm, punctuated by the delicate tasks of cleaning, feeding, and comforting. The initial process of removing the oil was arduous. João would sit for hours, patiently, meticulously, using warm water and mild soap, gently stroking Dindim's matted feathers. The penguin, still weak and distrustful, would squawk and peck, its tiny beak a surprisingly sharp weapon, but João never faltered. He spoke to the bird in soft, soothing tones, his voice a low, melodic hum that filled the quiet rooms. Slowly, agonizingly, the thick, black tar began to yield, revealing the pristine black and white plumage beneath. Each cleaned feather was a small victory, a testament to João's unwavering patience. As the oil receded, so too did Dindim's discomfort. The burning in his eyes subsided, the heavy weight lifted, and the itch of the sticky residue began to fade. With the oil gone, the next challenge was nourishment. Dindim, initially too sick to eat, refused the fresh sardines João offered. But João was persistent. He'd gently open the penguin's beak, easing in small pieces of fish, waiting for a swallow. Eventually, hunger, a powerful, primal force, began to override fear. Dindim took a hesitant bite, then another, and soon, the fresh sardines became a welcome, eagerly anticipated offering. As Dindim regained strength, his distrust gradually began to melt away. He stopped pecking at João's hands, allowing the gentle strokes, even leaning into them. He would follow João around the small house, a shadow waddling on short legs, or rest contentedly at his feet while João mended his nets. The small, domestic environment, once a strange, frightening place, became a protective sanctuary. João, watching the penguin recover, felt a profound attachment blossom within his heart. He began to treat Dindim not as a wild animal, but as a cherished companion, almost a child. He gave him a name, a simple, affectionate sound, Dindim. The name resonated with a quiet warmth, cementing the bond that was forming, brick by tender brick, between man and bird. João experienced a growing joy and wonder at Dindim's recovery, at the developing affection that shone in the penguin's now bright, intelligent eyes. Dindim, in turn, began to exhibit clear signs of recognition, comfort, and a unique dependence on the gentle human who had pulled him back from the brink. The quiet rhythm of their days, the patient hand-feeding, the gentle washing of feathers, these small details had built an invisible bridge between species, fostering a trust that transcended language. By June of 2011, Dindim was robust, healthy, and fully recovered. His feathers gleamed, his waddle was energetic, and his dives into the calm waters of Proveta Bay were swift and powerful. He would swim for hours, chasing small fish, his innate hunting instincts fully restored. But something else was stirring within him, a deep, ancient call that João, with his lifetime spent observing nature, recognized immediately. Dindim was spending more and more time at the water's edge, his gaze fixed on the vast, open ocean, a restless energy building in his small frame. The migratory urges, dormant during his convalescence, were reasserting themselves. João's heart, which had swelled with joy at Dindim's recovery, now ached with a bittersweet understanding. He knew, with an agonizing certainty, that Dindim belonged to the wild. His deep emotional attachment warred with the knowledge that to truly save Dindim, he had to let him go. The small house, once a haven, could not contain the boundless spirit of a creature born to traverse oceans. The day of release was a quiet, solemn affair. João carried Dindim to the familiar stretch of beach, the same rocks where he had found him months ago, near death. The morning sun glinted off the calm waters, holding both promise and uncertainty. The air was heavy with unspoken goodbyes, with a lingering hope that defied logic. João knelt, his hand resting for a final moment on Dindim's smooth, cool back. He murmured a few soft words, a silent prayer for safe passage. Then, with a gentle push, he released the penguin into the ocean. Dindim hesitated for a brief moment, perhaps a fleeting glance back at the man who had given him a second chance at life, a nascent memory of the human touch, the imprint of João's kindness. Then, with a powerful thrust of his flippers, he plunged into the waves. João watched, a lump forming in his throat, as Dindim swam strongly, purposefully, heading out towards the open sea, shrinking with every stroke until he was nothing more than a tiny, distant speck against the immense horizon. As Dindim disappeared into the waves, João was left with a silence that spoke volumes. The vast, indifferent ocean stretched before him, a stark contrast to the intimate bond they had just shared. He felt a profound grief, a void in his heart where Dindim's presence had been, but it was tempered with the quiet satisfaction of having saved a life. He trusted in Dindim's natural instincts, knowing he had done what was right, despite the ache in his soul. He wondered if he would ever see his feathered friend again. Would this be the end of their extraordinary tale, or merely the beginning? The silence that followed Dindim's departure was not merely the absence of a sound, but a palpable void, a hollow echo in João's small home and, more acutely, within his very soul. The vast, indifferent ocean, which had once cradled Dindim's struggling form and then borne him away to an unknown future, now stretched before João like an endless, mocking expanse. June slipped into July and July into August, each passing day marked by the relentless rhythm of the waves breaking on Proveta beach. João, a man of routine, found his daily patterns subtly altered, infused with a new, quiet purpose. Every morning, with the first blush of dawn painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, he would walk to the shoreline, his gaze sweeping the horizon. His eyes, keen from years of scanning for fish and weather changes, searched for a distinctive flicker, a familiar silhouette against the shimmering expanse. He knew it was futile, knew the journey Dindim had undertaken was immense, across thousands of miles of treacherous waters, back to the icy coasts of Patagonia where his kind bred. Yet, hope, a stubborn, resilient seedling, refused to wither in his heart. It was a hope born not of logic, but of a connection that had defied all reason. He would sit on the sun-warmed rocks, the gritty sand beneath his calloused hands, listening to the ceaseless murmur of the sea. Each wave that broke seemed to whisper Dindim's name, or perhaps, João's own yearning. He remembered the penguin's first, tentative pecks, the way Dindim had eventually nestled against his leg, a small, warm weight that had filled his lonely days with an unexpected joy. These memories, vivid and precious, were both a comfort and a torment, fueling his belief even as the calendar pages turned. The local community members of Proveta, his neighbors and fellow fishermen, observed João's daily ritual with a mix of gentle skepticism and a quiet, almost sympathetic amusement. "He's gone, João," old Manuel, his face as creased as a dried fig, would say, shaking his head. "The wild takes its own. You saved him, that's enough." Maria, who sold fried fish on the small pier, would offer him an extra portion, a silent gesture of pity. "A wild bird, João," she'd murmur kindly. "They don't come back." They meant well, their words steeped in generations of understanding the harsh realities of nature. For them, a rescued animal returned to the wild was a success story, complete. The idea of a wild creature, especially one that migrated thousands of miles, returning to a human, was simply beyond comprehension. João would simply nod, offer a small, tight smile, and continue his vigil. He understood their perspective, but he also understood something they couldn't: the unique language of trust that had passed between him and Dindim. He saw the gentle pity in their eyes, the occasional teasing, "Still waiting for your little shadow, João?" But it didn't sway him. His conviction was a private, unshakable fortress built on the memory of a grateful gaze and a soft feather against his skin. The seasons shifted. The intense heat of the Brazilian winter, a milder affair than its southern hemisphere counterpart, gave way to the burgeoning warmth of spring, then the humid embrace of early summer. The sea, too, underwent subtle transformations. The currents changed, the schools of fish moved, and the sun tracked a different path across the sky. Yet, João's routine remained steadfast. He'd mend his nets, prepare his boat, and always, always, spend time on that beach, his eyes fixed on the distant line where sky met water. A profound sadness would sometimes wash over him, a cold tide of doubt, but he would push it back, clinging to the persistent hope, the quiet determination that Dindim, his Dindim, would somehow find his way back. He was convinced, against all odds, that their bond was strong enough to defy the vastness of the ocean and the inherent instincts of the wild. Then came December. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the distant hum of cicadas, a harbinger of the approaching festive season. The sun beat down with an almost oppressive warmth, shimmering on the calm waters of the bay. João was out in his small fishing boat, just a little way from the shore, casting his nets as he had done for decades. The solitude of the water was a familiar comfort, allowing his thoughts to drift, often to the small, black and white shape that had once shared his home. He was pulling in a meager catch, his movements slow and practiced, when a flicker caught his eye. It was small, dark, and cutting through the water with an undeniable purpose. His heart gave a lurch, a sudden, sharp beat against his ribs. A cormorant? He thought, his mind trying to rationalize the impossible. But as it drew closer, the distinctive, streamlined shape, the powerful flippers propelling it through the water, became unmistakably clear. It was a penguin. João froze, his hands still on the wet ropes of his net. Disbelief, a thick, suffocating blanket, threatened to overwhelm him. It couldn't be. Not after all this time. Not after all the miles. He squinted, the sun glinting off the water making it hard to focus. But the image sharpened, solidifying with every powerful stroke the creature took. It was heading directly for his boat. His breath hitched in his throat. He dropped the net, the rope splashing into the water, forgotten. The penguin, now close enough for him to distinguish individual feathers, dipped its head, then resurfaced, its dark, intelligent eyes fixed on him. And then, it let out a sound. Not a squawk of alarm, but a soft, almost conversational call, a sound that stirred a deep, primal recognition within João. It was Dindim. A wave of emotion, so potent it brought tears to his eyes, washed over him. Joy, pure and unadulterated, surged through his veins, mingling with an overwhelming sense of relief and, yes, vindication. He hadn't been foolish. His faith hadn't been misplaced. Dindim, his Dindim, had come back. The penguin reached the side of the boat, its sleek body brushing against the worn wood. João, his hands trembling, reached down, and Dindim, without a moment's hesitation, nuzzled his hand, then nipped playfully at his fingers, a familiar gesture of affection. He scrambled out of the water, a surprisingly agile leap onto the small deck, his flippers flapping in a joyous, almost frantic greeting. He rubbed his head against João's leg, chirping softly, his entire being radiating comfort and happiness. João knelt, gathering the small, warm body into his arms, burying his face in the cool, smooth feathers. The scent of salt and fish, now mingled with the familiar, comforting aroma of Dindim, filled his senses. It was a miracle, a small, personal miracle unfolding on the open sea, a tangible warmth between man and bird that defied explanation. The news of Dindim's return spread through Proveta like wildfire. It started with João's own incredulous shouts as he steered his boat back to shore, Dindim perched proudly on the bow, a small, black and white figure silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Manuel, who had been mending his own net on the pier, dropped his tools, his jaw slack. Maria, wiping her hands on her apron, stared, her eyes wide with disbelief. It's him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Word traveled swiftly from shack to shack, carried by excited children and hushed, astonished adults. People began to gather on the beach, drawn by the incredible tale. They stood in small clusters, pointing, murmuring, their initial skepticism shattered by the undeniable sight before them. João stepped onto the sand, Dindim waddling confidently beside him, every now and then nudging João's leg as if to confirm his presence. The atmosphere in the small village, usually quiet and predictable, buzzed with an electrifying sense of wonder. Laughter, tinged with disbelief, mixed with hushed conversations. "I never thought I'd see the day," one fisherman exclaimed, shaking his head in amazement. João always said he'd come back, but, a penguin? From so far? Children, usually rambunctious, stood in awed silence, their eyes fixed on the small, celebrated bird. João, in the midst of this impromptu gathering, felt a quiet triumph swelling in his chest. His heart, still brimming with the immense joy of reunion, now also held a deep contentment. He wasn't one for grand pronouncements, but the smiles and astonished murmurs of his neighbors were all the vindication he needed. He shared his joy with them, a wide, genuine smile gracing his weathered face as he gently stroked Dindim's back. Dindim, for his part, seemed utterly unfazed by the growing crowd. His focus remained primarily on João, occasionally glancing at the curious faces, but always returning his gaze to his human, a silent testament to the bond that anchored him. He was calm, comfortable, a beloved, curious fixture instantly welcomed back into the heart of the community. From December of 2011 through January and into the heart of 2012, Dindim settled back into a harmonious routine with João. It was as if no time had passed, no vast ocean had been traversed. For approximately 8 months of the year, the small island of Ilha Grande, and João's humble home in Proveta, became Dindim's sanctuary. He lived freely, unconfined, yet he never strayed far from João's side. The daily rhythm of island life, once subtly altered by Dindim's absence, was now harmoniously re-established, enriched by his presence. Sunlight filtered through the broad fronds of the palm trees surrounding João's house, casting dappled shadows on the worn path where Dindim would waddle, a plump, energetic shadow following João as he went about his chores. He often accompanied João on his fishing trips, perched on the bow of the small boat, his keen eyes scanning the water, occasionally diving in to chase a particularly tempting fish, only to resurface beside the boat, a triumphant squawk escaping his beak. João would laugh, a deep, rumbling sound, and reach out to stroke the wet feathers, a gesture of shared contentment. In João's garden, a small patch of vibrant tropical plants and herbs, Dindim found endless fascination. He'd peck at fallen leaves, chase after scurrying insects, or simply sit in a patch of sunlight, preening his meticulously clean feathers. He allowed João to pet him, to scratch the soft feathers under his chin, often leaning into the touch with a soft sigh of pleasure. Their interactions were a silent language of trust and affection, understood perfectly by both. He became a beloved, curious fixture in the village. Children would approach him with wide-eyed wonder, offering small pieces of fish, which Dindim would accept with a dignified air. The fishermen, once skeptical, now greeted him with genuine fondness, marveling at his loyalty. He was a symbol of unexpected friendship, a living testament to the extraordinary, in an otherwise idyllic, unassuming setting. João experienced a deep, abiding happiness, a profound sense of companionship that filled the quiet corners of his life. Dindim's presence was a constant source of joy, a silent, feathered affirmation that their connection was real, enduring. Dindim, in turn, appeared utterly content, secure in his unique sanctuary, his bright eyes reflecting the affection he felt for his human companion. He had found a bond that transcended species, a home that was not just a place, but a person. As the months wound down, and the southern hemisphere winter began to cast its long, cool shadows across the island, a familiar restlessness began to stir within Dindim. It was June once more, and the powerful, ancient migratory instinct, which had drawn him away the previous year, reasserted itself. He spent more time at the water's edge, his gaze fixed on the endless horizon, his body language subtle but clear to João. He was preparing to leave. João observed these signs with a familiar pang of sadness, but this time, it was tempered with a profound faith and an almost quiet confidence. He had witnessed a miracle once, and now, he carried the knowledge, the certainty, that it could happen again. The farewell, though still tender, was less agonizing than the first. There was an understanding, an unspoken agreement between them. He walked Dindim to the beach, the familiar stretch of sand where their story had begun and where it now continued its cyclical dance. The ocean stretched before them, vast and imposing, representing both separation and the promise of future reunion. Sunlight glinted off the waves, a million tiny diamonds dancing on the water's surface. João knelt, his hand resting on Dindim's back, feeling the tremor of anticipation in the small body. "Go well, my friend," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "And come back to me." Quote. Dindim dipped his head, a soft, farewell nudge against João's hand, then slipped into the water. He swam strongly, purposefully, just as he had done the year before, his powerful flippers propelling him south, towards the distant Patagonian coast, towards his breeding grounds. João watched him go, his heart aching but also swelling with a profound sense of anticipation. He knew the perils of the journey, the vastness of the ocean, the dangers that lurked beneath the waves. But he also knew the strength of their bond, a connection that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. As Dindim's black and white form diminished into a distant speck, and then vanished altogether, João was left with the familiar silence. But this time, it was not an empty silence. It was filled with the promise of return, the quiet confidence of a bond proven, and the enduring hope that, once again, his feathered friend would navigate the impossible journey, guided not just by instinct, but by an internal compass set firmly for Proveta, and for the gentle human who waited for him there. The ocean might be immense, but the love that flowed between them was immeasurable, a force that João now knew could span continents and seasons, bringing Dindim home, year after remarkable year. The silence that had settled upon João Pereira de Souza after Dindim's first departure in June of 2011 had been a heavy, aching void, filled only by the whisper of the waves and the persistent drum of his own hope. But when Dindim returned in December, breaking the surface of the bay like a feathered arrow aimed directly at João's heart, that silence had been shattered by a cacophony of joy, relief, and utter disbelief. Now, a year later, as the humid embrace of December 2012 once again began to settle over Proveta, João found himself in a different kind of waiting. The silence was still there, but it was no longer heavy with uncertainty. It hummed with a quiet, almost sacred anticipation. He still walked the beach every morning, his eyes still scanning the horizon, but the urgency had softened, replaced by a deep-seated faith. He knew Dindim was out there, somewhere in the vast, indifferent ocean, navigating the treacherous currents, driven by an instinct far older than humanity, and by something else, something profoundly unique. A connection. The local community, who had witnessed the first miraculous return, no longer offered their gentle skepticism. Instead, they shared João's quiet anticipation, their eyes also occasionally sweeping the sea, a collective sense of wonder having taken root. "Any sign, João?" Manuel would ask, his voice softer than before, a genuine curiosity replacing the former pity. João would shake his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "Not yet, my friend. But he'll come." And then, one sweltering afternoon in late December, just as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, it happened again. João was sitting on his usual rock, mending a fishing net, his fingers moving with practiced ease, when a ripple disturbed the glassy surface of the bay. A dark shape, small at first, then growing, cutting a clean, swift line through the water. His heart, already primed by months of expectation, gave a jolt. He dropped his net, the twine falling silently into the sand. He didn't need to squint this time. There was no doubt, no flicker of disbelief. The penguin swam directly towards him, not towards his boat, but to the very spot on the beach where João sat. As Dindim neared the shore, he let out a distinctive, trilling call, a sound that pierced the afternoon quiet and resonated deep within João's chest. It was a greeting, an affirmation. The penguin, sleek and powerful, emerged from the water, shaking off the droplets, and waddled with an unhurried, confident gait directly to João. He nudged João's leg, then rubbed his head against the old fisherman's knee, a familiar, comforting gesture. João knelt, his hands gently cupping Dindim's smooth, cool head. He buried his face in the soft feathers, inhaling the familiar scent of salt and the sea, his eyes burning with unshed tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "My Dindim," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "you came back. You truly came back." This second return, however, was different. The first had been a local marvel, a whispered legend. This time, the story, fueled by the wonder of repetition, began to leap beyond the confines of Proveta. João's neighbors, now fully convinced of the miracle, were quick to share the news with passing tourists, with relatives in larger towns. Soon, the story reached the ears of journalists, first from local newspapers in Rio de Janeiro, then national news outlets. Early in 2013, the tranquil village of Proveta began to transform. The gentle hum of daily life was punctuated by the whirring of cameras, the sudden flash of spotlights, and the insistent questions of unfamiliar voices. The narrow, sandy paths that wound through the village, usually trodden only by fishermen and their families, now saw the unfamiliar sight of rental cars and vans, laden with equipment. Microphones, like strange, metallic fungi, sprouted near João's humble home. João, a man accustomed to the quiet solitude of his boat and the rhythmic predictability of the tides, found himself at the center of a media frenzy. His small, unassuming home, once a private sanctuary, became a focal point for curious eyes and eager lenses. He felt a mix of emotions, a quiet pride in Dindim's incredible loyalty, a slight bewilderment at the sudden attention, and an ever-present, fierce protectiveness over his feathered friend. He fielded questions patiently, his weathered face often creased in a gentle smile, his answers simple and heartfelt. He spoke of Dindim as if he were a beloved family member, which, to him, he was. He was happy to share their story, to let the world witness the magic, but he guarded Dindim's peace fiercely, ensuring the penguin was not overwhelmed or stressed by the constant presence of strangers. Dindim, surprisingly, adapted to the new environment with a serene indifference that bordered on regal. He remained focused on João, his bright, intelligent eyes following the old man's movements. The cameras, the flashing lights, the hushed murmurs of the crews, these were simply part of João's world, and therefore, part of Dindim's. He would waddle confidently through the legs of journalists, occasionally pausing to peer curiously at a lens, before returning to João's side, nudging his hand for a gentle scratch under the chin. He seemed to sense that the attention, though directed at him, was an extension of João's presence, a reflection of the love that bound them. The tranquil sounds of the sea were now often mingled with the artificial hum of equipment, yet the core of their unique bond remained undisturbed, a quiet, unwavering beacon amidst the growing external clamor. As 2013 gave way to 2015, Dindim's annual returns ceased to be merely astonishing. They became a consistent, celebrated event, a predictable miracle that captivated the world. Each December, without fail, Dindim would reappear, swimming into Proveta Bay, a tiny, determined voyager completing an impossible journey. His arrival was now met not just by João, but by a small, expectant crowd of locals and, increasingly, by eager journalists and even a handful of tourists who had traveled specifically to witness the phenomenon. The story, once a local curiosity, now went truly global. Images and videos of Dindim and João spread across continents, transcending language barriers and cultural divides. A clip of Dindim rubbing his head against João's leg, or swimming beside his fishing boat, would go viral, shared millions of times over. The sheer warmth and wonder of their tale resonated deeply within the human spirit, fostering a collective sense of hope and a belief in the extraordinary. In a world often consumed by cynicism and division, the simple, profound friendship between an old fisherman and a Magellanic penguin became a beacon of innocence and unconditional love. João, watching the world's reaction from his quiet corner of Ilha Grande, experienced a quiet joy and a profound gratitude. He remained grounded, his life still centered around the rhythms of the sea and the simple comforts of his home, but he was humbled by the global recognition. He saw the wonder in the eyes of visitors, the tears in the eyes of reporters, and understood that their story had touched something universal. He was just João, a fisherman who had saved a bird, but Dindim had made him, and their bond, a symbol. He never sought fame, but he accepted it with the same quiet dignity with which he lived his life. His connection with Dindim was deeply personal, yet it had become a shared treasure for humanity, a testament to the boundless capacity for connection across species. The world, in turn, felt a collective sense of wonder, inspiration, and emotional connection to this unlikely friendship, a poignant reminder that magic could still exist in the most unexpected places. From 2014 to 2016, as Dindim's annual pilgrimage solidified into an undeniable pattern, the phenomenon began to attract the attention of the scientific community. It was one thing for a bird to be rescued and released. It was another entirely for it to return, year after year, over thousands of miles, to a specific human. This defied conventional understanding of animal behavior, particularly for a migratory species. Professor David Z., a marine biologist from the State University of Rio de Janeiro, was among the first and most prominent experts to take a serious interest. He traveled to Proveta, not with the sensationalism of a journalist, but with the measured curiosity of a scientist. His presence added a new layer to the narrative, a cool, analytical lens through which to examine the warmth of the human-animal bond. He and his team observed Dindim and João, conducted interviews, and collected data, attempting to find a scientific explanation for the inexplicable. Debates emerged within the scientific community. Was Dindim's attachment truly unique, a singular instance of profound interspecies bonding? Was it a learned behavior, the penguin having associated João with survival and comfort? Or was it a case of brain imprinting, a powerful, indelible connection formed during a critical developmental period, similar to how ducklings imprint on their mothers? Professor Z, quoted in numerous media reports, spoke of the extraordinary nature of the bond, acknowledging that while penguins are known to form strong pair bonds, an attachment to a human, enduring over such vast distances in time, was unprecedented. He hypothesized that Dindim might view João not just as a rescuer, but as a member of his own colony, perhaps even as a parent figure, due to the intense care received during a vulnerable stage. João, while respectful of the scientists, maintained a slight detachment from their analyses. For him, the connection with Dindim was deeply personal and intuitive, something felt rather than explained. He understood they sought answers, but he knew the truth of their bond lay beyond charts and theories, in the quiet exchange of affection, in the shared moments of peace. He would patiently answer Professor Z's questions, describing Dindim's behavior, the way he chirped, the way he sought João's touch. He felt a sense of validation that serious minds were acknowledging the reality of their story, but his own understanding remained rooted in the heart. Professor Z, on the other hand, felt a professional fascination and excitement that bordered on exhilaration. This was a chance to push the boundaries of known animal behavior, to perhaps rewrite textbooks on migration and interspecies communication. He saw in Dindim and João a living experiment, a profound anomaly that held keys to understanding the complex inner lives of animals. The small, humble home in Proveta, once just a fisherman's dwelling, became a field laboratory, where the simple, heartfelt interactions between man and bird were meticulously observed, categorized, and discussed, adding a rich, intellectual curiosity to the already profound emotional narrative. The scientific scrutiny, far from diminishing the magic, only deepened the mystery, proving that some connections, even when examined under the most rigorous lens, still held a beautiful, unquantifiable wonder. Between 2015 and 2017, João's life was irrevocably transformed by Dindim's fame. He was no longer just a retired bricklayer and fisherman from Proveta, he was the Penguin Man, the human half of an extraordinary global phenomenon. His quiet, predictable existence was replaced by a constant stream of visitors, curious tourists, fervent admirers, and an endless procession of journalists and media crews from every corner of the globe. His small home, once a private sanctuary, became a semi-public stage. People would arrive unannounced, hoping for a glimpse of Dindim, eager to hear João recount their story. He would patiently oblige, his voice soft, his eyes twinkling with a mix of warmth and perhaps a touch of weariness. He was often approached in the village, on his boat, even in the local market, by strangers wanting to shake his hand, to thank him for inspiring them, to ask endless questions about Dindim's habits, his personality, his migratory secrets. This sudden, relentless demand on his time and privacy took a toll. There were moments of exhaustion, times when the constant attention felt overwhelming. The tranquility he cherished, the quiet rhythm of his days, was frequently disrupted. Yet, through it all, his love for Dindim remained an inexhaustible source of strength and purpose. He viewed his role as Dindim's protector with unwavering commitment. He learned to navigate the media landscape, politely declining some requests, granting others, always with Dindim's well-being as his paramount concern. He made sure Dindim had space, quiet moments away from the cameras, and that he was never exploited or distressed by the crowds. His patience was legendary. He would sit for hours, answering the same questions, recounting the same tale, his gaze unwavering, his gentle touch towards Dindim a constant, grounding force amidst the artificial glare of the cameras. The demands of fame clashed starkly with the quiet dignity of João's character, but he met them with the same resilience and simple grace he had always applied to life's challenges. He knew that this extraordinary life, however demanding, was a gift, a testament to the profound impact of a single act of kindness. His deep responsibility to protect Dindim from the pressures of fame was a burden he carried willingly, prioritizing the penguin's peace above all else, ensuring that their unique bond, the very essence of their story, remained pure and untainted by the clamor of the outside world. As 2017 drew to a close, and the familiar, humid embrace of December returned to Proveta, a new kind of tension began to weave its way into João's quiet anticipation. Dindim's returns had, by now, become a cherished ritual, a predictable miracle. But this year, something felt different. The usual window for his arrival, typically in early December, stretched longer than usual. Days turned into weeks, and the horizon remained stubbornly empty of the familiar black and white speck. João's daily walks to the beach, once filled with quiet confidence, now carried a heavier weight of worry. He scanned the vast ocean with an intensity that bordered on desperation, his heart heavy with the chilling possibility that this might be the year Dindim wouldn't return. The elements, usually a comforting backdrop to his life, now felt more formidable, the vastness of the ocean more menacing, the passage of time a relentless, ticking clock. He imagined the perils Dindim faced: treacherous storms, hungry predators, the ever-present threat of pollution. Each passing day without a sighting gnawed at his soul, bringing a cold fear that tightened its grip around his heart. The villagers, too, noticed João's heightened anxiety, their shared anticipation now tinged with a collective worry. They offered quiet words of comfort, but their own faces reflected the growing concern. It was well into January of 2018, later than any previous year, when a small fishing boat radioed in a sighting. Penguin, heading towards Proveta. The news electrified the village. João, who had been sitting on his porch, staring blankly at the sea, sprang to his feet, his old bones protesting, but his spirit soaring. He rushed to the beach, his eyes already searching, praying. And then, he saw him. A small, dark shape, cutting through the water, slower than usual, perhaps, but undeniably Dindim. As the penguin neared the shore, João's breath hitched. Dindim looked weary, his usually sleek feathers slightly disheveled, his movements less energetic than in previous years. He was visibly tired, the long journey having taken its toll. But despite his weariness, Dindim's purpose was clear. He swam directly to João, ignoring the small crowd that had gathered, his eyes fixed only on the familiar figure standing at the water's edge. He hauled himself onto the sand, shaking himself, then stumbled slightly as he began to waddle towards João. There was no exuberant flapping of flippers this time, no playful nips. Just a profound, almost desperate drive to reach his human. João knelt, his face etched with immense relief, tears streaming freely down his weathered cheeks. He gathered the tired, trembling body into his arms, holding Dindim close, burying his face in the cool, damp feathers. The penguin, in turn, leaned into the embrace, a soft, exhausted chirping sound escaping his beak. He pressed his head against João's chest, seeking the familiar warmth, the comforting presence that had drawn him across thousands of miles. The reunion was especially poignant, profoundly emotional. It wasn't just a celebration of return, but a cathartic release of weeks of intense worry and fear. It was a testament to the enduring strength of their bond, a silent, powerful affirmation that defied all odds, all logic, and the relentless march of time. Dindim, perhaps more exhausted than usual, still sought out João, finding comfort and safety in his presence, reinforcing the depth of their mutual attachment, a connection that seemed to deepen with each passing, challenging year. João held him tight, immensely grateful, his heart swelling with a love that felt almost spiritual, a love that understood the quiet heroism of a small penguin swimming back to him, year after remarkable year. The profound relief that had washed over João in early 2018, when Dindim, weary but resolute, had finally returned to Proveta, lingered like the sweet, damp scent of rain after a long drought. It was a relief so deep it bordered on the spiritual, a testament to a bond that had now, for the seventh year, defied the impossible. But beyond the personal catharsis, something else was shifting. The story of Dindim and João, once a local marvel, then a national sensation, and finally a global phenomenon, was beginning to transcend its initial novelty. It was no longer just a curious tale of a faithful penguin, it was evolving, steadily, into a timeless narrative, a modern-day fable whispered across continents. The endless stream of journalists, while still present, became less frenetic, their questions less about the immediate miracle and more about the enduring mystery. They sought not just to report, but to understand the profound connections possible between humans and the animal kingdom. João, in his weathered wisdom, became less of a subject and more of an oracle, his simple words holding a weight that resonated far beyond his humble existence. He spoke of love, of patience, of the unspoken language of the heart, and his words, translated into countless languages, carried the quiet power of undeniable truth. In the small, sun-drenched village of Proveta, Dindim was no longer just João's penguin. He was the penguin, a living legend, a symbol of loyalty that inspired awe and affection. Children, growing up on the island, knew Dindim's story as intimately as they knew the tides. They would point him out to visitors, their voices filled with a pride that bordered on ownership. He was a beacon, a reminder that the world held magic, that kindness could return tenfold, that even the smallest creatures could embody the grandest virtues. João, sitting on his porch overlooking the bay, often watched Dindim preening on the rocks, or diving playfully in the shallows. A quiet pride settled deep within him, a warmth that chased away the chill of old age. He had not set out to change the world, only to save a life, yet Dindim's existence had, in its own gentle way, done just that. It had inspired countless individuals, fostering a deeper appreciation for interspecies relationships, opening hearts to the idea that love knew no boundaries of species or geography. He saw it in the letters that arrived from distant lands, in the tearful eyes of visitors, in the hushed reverence with which people spoke of Dindim. Their story was a gentle, persistent echo, reminding humanity of its better nature, of the boundless capacity for empathy and connection that lay dormant in every soul, waiting to be awakened. The atmosphere around them was no longer just about a man and a bird, it was about enduring symbolism, the quiet strength of a bond that had become a universal language of love. As 2019 dawned, the story of Dindim and João had achieved a global reach that even the most seasoned journalists found astounding. It had permeated popular culture, appearing in documentaries, children's books, and countless online articles. But beyond the heartwarming narrative, a more profound ripple effect was beginning to spread, one that touched upon the very crisis that had brought Dindim to João's shore. The initial oil spill, a tragic event that could have easily faded from public memory, was now brought into sharp focus by Dindim's annual pilgrimage. His matted, oil-soaked feathers, vividly recalled by João's recounting, served as a stark, living reminder of the devastating impact of marine pollution. Environmental organizations, both local and international, seized upon the narrative, finding in Dindim a poignant, relatable mascot for their conservation efforts. Professor David Z., the marine biologist who had meticulously studied Dindim's behavior, became a vocal advocate, using the penguin's story to highlight the vulnerability of migratory species. In interviews and lectures, he would speak not only of the unique bond but also of the existential threats facing Magellanic penguins' habitat loss, overfishing, climate change, and, most acutely, oil spills. Dindim is a survivor, he would often say, his voice grave, but how many Dindims never make it back? How many never find a João? Quote, the attention generated by their story led to tangible action. Local initiatives on Ilha Grande gained momentum, focusing on beach cleanups and educating fishermen about sustainable practices. International conservation groups saw a surge in donations and volunteer applications, many citing Dindim as their inspiration. Workshops on marine animal rescue, particularly for oiled birds, became more prevalent, drawing on the lessons learned from João's painstaking efforts. João, though not a public speaker or an activist, found himself at the heart of this burgeoning awareness. He would sit with environmentalists, listening intently, his presence a quiet endorsement of their cause. He understood the connection implicitly. The ocean, which had given him Dindim, was also the ocean that had nearly taken him. He saw the beauty of the natural world, the vibrant marine life just off the coast of Proveta, and he understood how fragile it all was, how easily human impact could turn a pristine habitat into a death trap. The air around Proveta, once just salty, now carried the faint, hopeful scent of change, of a collective call to action. The psychological state of conservationists and environmental advocates shifted from quiet struggle to renewed urgency and optimism, leveraging Dindim's story to educate and inspire. The public, moved by the plight of this single, remarkable creature, became more conscious of their ecological footprint, motivated by a simple, powerful truth. If one man's kindness could save a penguin, perhaps collective human effort could save an entire ecosystem. As the years rolled on, 2020, then 2021, and beyond, the annual ritual of Dindim's return continued. A steadfast rhythm in an ever-changing world. But with the inevitable passage of time, the subtle marks of age began to etch themselves onto both João and his beloved penguin. João, now well into his 80s, moved with a slower, more deliberate gait. His once strong hands, though still capable, trembled slightly more as he mended his nets. His hair, already white, seemed to gleam with an even greater luminosity, a silver crown against his tanned, wrinkled skin. He still walked to the beach every morning, but sometimes, his bones ached with a deep, persistent weariness, a quiet protest against the relentless march of time. His eyes, however, retained their profound warmth, their unwavering depth, especially when fixed on the horizon, waiting. Dindim, too, showed the gentle signs of aging. His once powerful, swift dives were perhaps a fraction slower, his waddle on land a little less spry. The vibrant energy of his youth had mellowed into a tender, familiar rhythm. His feathers, while still meticulously clean, might have held a touch less sheen. His eyes, though still bright, sometimes seemed to carry the weight of countless migrations, of thousands of miles traversed. The returns themselves, while still miraculous, might become slightly less predictable. One year, Dindim might arrive a week later, causing a familiar, but less frantic, ripple of worry through João. Another year, his stay on the island might be a little shorter, the migratory urge perhaps calling him away earlier, or the need for rest after his epic journey extending his departure. João, observing these subtle changes, felt a bittersweet acceptance settle over him. He knew, with the wisdom of his years, that nothing lasted forever. His love for Dindim remained as steadfast and boundless as the ocean itself, but it was now tinged with the poignancy of impending farewells. He would watch Dindim sleeping peacefully in the garden, or swimming in the calm bay, and his heart would swell with gratitude for every precious moment they shared, knowing each one was a gift. He would sometimes find himself contemplating the eventual end of their extraordinary journey, a thought that brought a pang of sorrow but also a profound understanding. Dindim, while still seeking João's comforting presence, still nudging his hand for a gentle scratch, might exhibit signs of slowing down, perhaps resting longer after a swim, or seeking out the warmest patches of sun more frequently. He was living out his later years in the comforting presence of his human friend, a testament to the sanctuary João had created for him. The atmosphere around them, once filled with the excitement of miraculous reunions, now held a more profound, tender quality, a gentle passage of time. The landscape remained constant, the waves still crashed, the palm fronds still swayed, but the figures within it showed the subtle, beautiful marks of age, adding a poignant, temporal layer to their enduring story. The quiet moments shared between man and penguin became infused with an even deeper significance, each touch, each glance, a silent affirmation of a love that defied all expectations, a bond that had gracefully navigated the currents of time. Then came the year when the rhythmic cycle, so faithfully maintained for 8 consecutive seasons, faltered. The humid embrace of December arrived, but Dindim did not. João, now a truly old man, his movements slow and deliberate, felt the familiar stir of anticipation, but it was accompanied by a deeper, more profound sense of foreboding than ever before. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the horizon remained stubbornly, agonizingly empty. The villagers, who had long since accepted Dindim's returns as a natural phenomenon, watched João with heavy hearts. They knew the signs: the relentless scanning of the ocean, the quiet, solitary walks along the beach, the way João's eyes, usually so full of warmth, now held a shadow of profound sorrow. Manuel, his own voice now raspy with age, would sit with João on the porch, sharing the silence, offering a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of shared understanding. João waited. He waited through the scorching heat of summer, through the gentler breezes of autumn, until the very air around Proveta seemed to hold its breath, waiting with him. But Dindim never came. Whether it was the perils of the vast migration that finally claimed him, a powerful storm, a hungry predator, or simply the natural progression of life, the beloved penguin's visits ceased. The wild, which had once given him back, had now, irrevocably, reclaimed him. The beach where João had once waited, where Dindim had emerged from the waves countless times, was now empty of its familiar visitor. The sounds of the waves, once a comforting lullaby, now seemed to echo with a profound absence, a haunting reminder of both presence and profound loss. A deep, pervasive silence descended upon João's home, marking the end of an extraordinary era, a quiet, aching void that no amount of human companionship could fill. João experienced a grief so deep it felt physical, akin to losing a beloved family member. His heart, which had held so much hope and joy for Dindim, now ached with an unbearable emptiness. He would sit by the window, staring out at the ocean, imagining Dindim's sleek form cutting through the water, hearing his distinctive trilling call. The memories, once a source of comfort, now brought a fresh wave of sorrow. Yet, his sorrow was intertwined with an immense gratitude, a profound appreciation for the years of companionship, for the miracle they had shared. He understood. The wild had given Dindim a second chance, and Dindim had used it to forge a bond that transcended species, a bond that had enriched João's life beyond measure. He cherished every memory, every touch, every shared moment of quiet understanding. The world, too, felt a collective sadness, acknowledging the end of a cherished story, a reminder of the delicate balance between life and loss. Though Dindim's annual visits eventually ceased, the story of Dindim and João did not fade into the annals of forgotten tales. Instead, it endured, carried by the ocean's breeze and whispered among generations, transforming into a powerful testament to empathy, loyalty, and the boundless capacity for connection across species. Their bond, forged in oil and nurtured by kindness, became a legend, a beacon of hope in a world often overshadowed by cynicism. João, in his later years, found solace not only in the enduring memory of his feathered friend but also in the profound, positive impact their story had on the world. He witnessed the discussions it sparked, about animal welfare, about the sacred duty of conservation, about the profound effect a single act of kindness could have. Schools across Brazil, and indeed the globe, incorporated Dindim's tale into their curricula, teaching children not just about penguins, but about compassion, perseverance, and the interconnectedness of all life. Tourists still came to Proveta, not to see Dindim, but to see João, to stand on the beach where the miracle had unfolded, to feel the lingering echo of an extraordinary love. The imagery of the old fisherman and the faithful penguin on the sun-drenched beach transcended its initial reality, becoming an iconic representation of universal truths. It resonated deeply within the human spirit, a poignant reminder that genuine connection could manifest in the most unexpected forms, defying scientific explanation and societal norms. João felt a quiet pride, a deep satisfaction in knowing that Dindim's legacy would continue to inspire, long after both of them were gone. He knew that the magic inherent in their friendship, the profound simplicity and power of a bond that defied all expectations, had forever changed those who heard their story. Humanity, reflecting on the lessons learned, was reminded that kindness was a force as powerful as any ocean current, capable of bringing life back from the brink, and of building bridges between worlds. The penguin who swam back, year after year, had left an everlasting echo, a timeless testament to the enduring power of love.